So far in chapter 10, we've been doing a lot of introducing the basics of the futures and options market, introducing a lot of the different topics, talking about longing the market, or if you're going to short the market, what a hedger and a speculator is. Well, in this latter part of the chapter, we're actually going to dive more into how can we use the futures and options as a hedger in agriculture in order to reduce that price risk. So let's go through a couple of quick examples. As a matter of fact, we're going to go through several examples in this part of the chapter. But what if we are engaging in the livestock futures? So let's assume who would engage in the livestock futures? Well, it might be a feed yard who is looking to buy feeder cattle and sell live cattle. It might be a feedlot who's looking to buy corn because corn is a primary input. So what if we dive into the futures options a little bit? Assume that we're a feed yard and assume a feed yard where they buy cattle and they keep those cattle for 200 days. They keep the cattle for 200 days on feed. Corn is their primary input. They use corn as the feed on this particular feedlot, and that's their primary input. So what are they worried about? They're worried about a couple of different things. Because corn is their primary input, they're worried about corn prices changing. Specifically, they're worried about corn prices increasing. On top of that, what else are they worried about? What other price risk are they worried about? Well, they're worried about the price of live cattle falling. A lot of stuff can happen in 200 days in a market, especially if there's black swan events, such as, a particular beef plant burning up, or a pandemic that hits the world. There's a lot of different black swan events, and what a black swan event is something that nobody can really predict. It happens, it hits, and it causes a major disruption to the market. So they're worried about prices going up for corn, and they're worried about prices going down. So guess what? They know what they pay for their cattle. So they understand what their costs are to buy those cattle. But what they're worried about is, what is the price going to be for those fed cattle or those live cattle in 200 days? So this particular feedlot, they want to protect themselves from, of course, falling cattle prices and rising corn prices. So what are they going to do? They are actually going to short the live cattle futures market. They're going to be selling cattle here in the near future, and because of that, they're worried about prices dropping. If you're going to be selling an output and you're worried about prices dropping for that particular output, you short the market. And the reason why, and we're going to get into a couple more examples that really hammer this idea home, but if prices fall in the cash market, they're probably going to fall in the futures market. They tend to work along the same in the same way. So if prices fall in the futures market, do you make or lose money if you shorted the market? Well, you make money by shorting the market. Remember, you are agreeing to sell it at a certain price, and then prices fall. Well, you buy that contract back at that lower price. So if you're going to short the market and prices fall, you make money in the futures. So if the prices fall in the cash and the futures and you shorted the market, well, you make money in the futures, and that goes to offset the loss in the cash market. So they're wanting to protect themselves from a decrease in the price of live cattle, so they're going to short that market. Now, what are they worried about in the corn market? Well, they're worried about the corn prices increasing, right? So they want to protect themselves from an increase in corn. So if you're buying inputs and you're worried about the input prices going up, you're going to long that market. And what that means is, remember, if you long the market, you agree to buy at a specific price, and prices go up, you sell it back at a higher price and you make money. So if the prices increase for that particular commodity, they go up, and you're worried about them doing that, well, you long the market, you make money in the futures, and that goes to reduce the price, your net price at which you'll actually have to pay for that input. So what about and that was an example of the livestock futures. Well, who else might be engaging in livestock futures? It might be lean hogs, a hog feeder selling to a packing plant. There used to be futures contracts on eggs, actually. That was before the poultry industry really became more or less, or became almost vertically integrated almost entirely vertically integrated, and now there isn't a need. There was a lot less trade for those eggs, but livestock futures plays a major role in the feed or in the futures market. What about grain and oilseed futures? When would we might use that? So let's imagine something. Let's imagine that Cargill expects to buy 100,000 bushels of soybeans in April. Think about that. They're looking to buy 100,000 soybean or bushels of soybeans. What if the price changes by $1 a bushel? Well, they're looking to pay either $100,000 more, or they're looking to pay $100,000 less. Especially whenever you start getting into very large volumes, small changes in price can have a large impact on the total amount paid. So of course, somebody like Cargill, who's going to be buying a lot, is going to want to reduce their price risk. So they expect to buy 100,000 bushels of soybeans in April, but they aren't going to need them until August. They aren't going to be processing or using them until August. So they are going to take those soybeans and turn it into soybean meal and oil. That this Cargill is expected to turn that 100,000 bushels of soybeans into soybean meal and oil, and they are going to engage in a short hedge of the September contract, or short hedge the September Chicago Board of Trade soybean meal and futures contract in April. So they're going to sell this particular product in August. Well, there isn't an August soybean contract, a soybean futures contract. So they're using the next closest month, which is September. So they're going to actually short hedge or take the short position for the soybean meal and oil futures in April. They're taking that short position. They're engaging in it in April for the September contract because they're going to be selling soybean meal and oil in August. And they want to protect themselves from, you got it, falling prices. They're going to lock in. So essentially what they're trying to do is they're trying to lock in a processing margin. They are margin makers in this particular example. They're not going to be price takers or anything like that. They're wanting to lock in a processing margin when it buys 6 months before the final product is utilized. So essentially what Cargill is trying to do is they're trying to reduce their price risk and lock in the amount at which they're going to sell this commodity by short hedging in September. And they're going to do this they're going to do this 6 months, even though it says SWIX. They're going to do this 6 months before the final product is actually utilized. So Cargill, they're going to know they're going to know their costs. They're going to know what's the price at which they're buying it, but the prices are unknown. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to establish or forward price those that soybean meal and oil prices. They're going to try and forward price it or lock in those prices. And by locking in those prices, they're going to be locking in that price, that processing margin, hopefully to where they can actually make a profit off of it.